Welcome back, Wayfinders. Today, I'll be introducing my grandfather, Major Francis Sigwart, in a video that I filmed in 2008. The footage you're seeing now is cut from a more recent 3-day survival challenge that I've already posted on the channel. However, my voluntary 3-day summer survival in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan pales in comparison to Grandpa's involuntary 4-day Arctic survival in Alaska. This story takes place in January of 1956, when my grandpa was the commander of the 1st Eskimo Scout Battalion, watching for Soviet incursions post-World War II. His job was to contract Alaska natives to form an interconnected trap line along the coast in order to gather intel and report back on Soviet activity. With him that day was Brigadier General Noyes, who was inspecting the program, Major Kobe, a close friend and experienced pilot, and a flying mechanic who my grandpa just refers to as the sergeant. They were flying an L-20 Beaver with attached skis, coming back from one of the Alaska native villages when they hit bad weather. Instead of recounting the story myself, I'm going to sit back and allow you to see the raw footage along with some other media of that era. I hope you enjoy this piece of my family history.
Up to Nome, that was my headquarters, and I had 31 Eskimo village. I had troops in, radio set up, and we were keeping our eyes on the coast in the air for the Army and for the Air Force in Alaska. And because it's a tough job running that 31 Eskimo villages in the wintertime, and so he come up to help me. So he went out the first day. We went out to Teller Mission, and that's west of Nome, and that's where my headquarters was. And then we went out to Wales, and from there we come back. We come back to Nome. But then the next day we went up. I had to go back to Teller Mission again because I had to bring one of my Eskimo scouts a buckle for his sling. Right. So anyway. So we got into there, and then we went back out to Wales, and we went north then to Shishmaref along the Arctic Ocean. That's from the Bering Straits. You know, Wales is the furthest most west village in Alaska, in the United States. And of course, there's Little Diomede out in the Bering Straits, which belongs to us, and the Big Diomede belongs to the Russians. So from there we went north to Shishmaref, and that's a nice village. And so then coming back from there, we had to come up to the mountains, and so 4,500 feet mountains. So so the pilot went up to 7,500 feet, and starting to cross them. In the meantime, every time we got in the airplane, I'd ask the general never fastened his shoulder strap, so I'd say to the pilot, he was a major also, and I'd say, you have the general fasten his straps, his shoulder straps, and he'd say, General, do you want to fasten your shoulder straps? And the general said, no. So I'd say, Kobe, you can't take off until he does that. But Kobe would take off anyway. He was a major who was scared of the general, see. So anyway, we got up, and as we come over there, Nome was about a couple hundred miles south of this, and they were having the worst storm of the year, 70, 80 knot winds, and we started south then towards Nome, and we got iced up. We completely iced. We had 3 inches of ice on our cables and on our front of our airplane, on the front of the wings, and we was coming down, and we were dropping down, mostly from the weight we were carrying. But we come into a mountain. We come up right up to this mountain, and I said, Kobe, there's a mountain, and he hit it with a ski. Believe it or not, we hit that with them skis. Come right off, just touched them, come back around, straight around in 70 knot, 80 knot winds now. And we come back to it, and I says, Kobe, you're going to hit that mountain again. And I was sitting right behind him, and the general was on the right, on and the pilot was, or the mechanic was sitting on my right. So so we come to that mountain. When he come to it by he just throwed her full throttle and pulled it back, and we just went over that mountain, and we just missed a great big 25 foot size rock up there. And then we just more than got over the mountain, the wind slammed us down, busted our skis out, busted one wing forward, and we started skidding, but our cowl of the airplane dug in and stopped us. And that's the only thing, because otherwise we'd have went 1,500 feet straight on, almost down straight. So, so when I woke up, when I come to, the door was, on the left side, the door was open, and I laid on the ground there, and my left mitt was off. I had Air Force mitts on, they were orange. And I knew I had to get that mitt back on, or I'd freeze it to hand. So I tied it on too, because we had where the straps held your gloves together when they just hung down, you know. And I put that back on, and I got up, and meantime the mechanic was out, and so I looked at Cobb, the pilot. He was blood all over his face and leaning forward. He was knocked out. And the general, he's over there bent forward also, and so I had to get the pilot out. Meantime, the sergeant went in the back and got 2 sleeping bags. That's all there was. This pilot we didn't have any emergency gear or nothing, just 2 sleeping bags. And so I got him up. He come to, and I got him out in the back of the airplane. And it's a 6-seater, you know. It's a L-20 Beaver, beautiful airplane, powerful. And I got him laid down there, and I had to get over him and stretch this mummy bag on him, and get him into it. And then by the time I got that, the mechanic got the old parachutes out and made a bed out of that for him. And he checked the general and said the general was gone. See, the general had crashed his head into the dashboard. And so then I got my sleeping bag and I got it on it, but I laid the seats were folded forward. That's the second set of seats was folded forward, and I laid right on top of the old aluminum. I didn't even know enough to raise the seats back up, you know, so you'd be on the seat. And I laid there for 33 hours, and I didn't even know enough to zip up the sleeping bag. But I just held it with my hands, and then once in a while I laid my head up against the back seat of the pilot, where the pilot sat. And meantime, I had a fractured skull, and you could see on the seat where I'd cracked it with my skull, and it had a crack in it and blood on it. So we laid there, and the storm raged on and on and on, and I guess I slept and just hung on. That's all. So and then one week when it did clear up, I could get out and meantime, before I put the pilot in his seat, I had to go around the other side of the plane and shut that door because the wind was coming from that side. I had shut the door on the other side of the airplane to keep the wind from coming through on us, see? And that was a struggle. So anyway, we sat there, and I figured out 3 different ways to come off that mountain. I thought I could see if I could come off and get to Nome. I figured we was about 20 miles north of Nome then. And so I finally figured I went the right way. If I'd went any of the other 2 ways, I'd have never made it. And so the sergeant decided to go with me, the mechanic, And I told Cole, I'm going to go get help because the airplanes were coming over us, but never they wasn't looking till after they was over us. That's the rescue planes were. So I decided I was going to go down. So I took this way down this 1,500 feet to a draw, and I had my right knee was froze, and it was in bad shape, and my eyes looked like the Lone Ranger, black eyes. I could only see out of one of them. So anyway, I started down there, and I would ski on my left leg. I had Eskimo mucklucks on, by the way. I was allowed to wear them up there. And so I'd ski on that for about 50 feet, and then I'd stop because I was going too fast. And meantime, this arm was swelled up. I didn't know 3 days. The third day, I finally see my watch was on my arm here, all swelled up. Well, anyway, I must have fell 50 times going down that hill, and we got into this draw. By this time, I was so thirsty, and going along this draw was just a little creek running down, and down in the bottom, about 10, 12 feet down there, you could see water every once in a while, and then there would be clear, and then there would be snow, and then you could see the creek again. But I almost jumped down there to get a drink. I was so thirsty, and I was walking across on the left side of this draw, and I was picking up every little piece of ice, frozen ice or snow on the side of it. And I was eating that just fast as I could. I was that thirsty. So we got down to the bottom of the draw, and the sergeant was ahead of me. He was in pretty good shape yet, and so the banks were about 5 feet high, and I just laid up against them, just heaving and huffing and puffing. And he went, and there was a cabin there, a miner's cabin. So he got out there, and he says, "Miner's cabin up here." So I said, "Okay, check it out." And so he went into the shed. There were some holes in the shed, so he could go in there. And so then I finally got up over the bank, and I went in that hole, and I could see there was a door there run into the house, and snow was up halfway up on it because it's blowing snow up there in Alaska. And so I opened that up, and there's sort of range in there. It's an oil kitchen range, like the old wood cave, but it was oil. So I had some matches, got some matches there. So I started. I'd get a cup of oil from the reservoir in the back, and I'd pour it in, and I'd get it started. I got her started, and then, but it was froze. It wouldn't start. So pretty soon I had her started good, and then I'd just keep feeding that with a cup of water or oil, and but meantime he was so hungry, and I was so hungry. I had a pie plate there. I just filled it with snow and put it on the stove when it was getting hot. And I put salt. He looked at it. I said, "What's?" He looked down into the cupboards, and there was a box of oatmeal in there. I said, "Boy," he says, "box of oatmeal there." I said, "Okay, we'll have oatmeal." So I put salt in the snow that was melting, had it all set. So I said, "Okay, bring me that oatmeal." I just had a pie plate with this. I was going to make this oatmeal. And he says, shook the box, there's nothing in it. I said, "Oh boy." He said, "But there's some beans in here, some navy beans." And he got 24 beans out of that was laid right there in the cupboard on the shelf. And I put them in and I cooked them. And I divided. He took 12 and I took 12. He said, "Boy, this is the best beans I ever eaten in my life," he said. So we stayed there that night. And am I still talking all right? Well, okay. And then the next day, meantime, there was a shed out there, and the sergeant got out there and got some rolls of roughing out, and he got them on fire. It looked like we had a freight train going down there, the old kind with the boilers and coal. And but meantime, we just no more got in that shack, and down come an airplane, but we didn't see no smoke. They didn't know where we were. Couldn't see our tracks. It just come down that draw. And so the next morning, there was some sleeping bags in there, so we both had a sleeping bag there. It was already in the cabin. So we stayed there and we had the fire going all night. Meantime, it thawed out and the oil thawed out and it run it by itself, see. So next morning we decided to head for Nome. We were going to walk. And they found some 16-foot boards out there in this shack where he kept supplies. And we made an arrow pointing towards Nome. And we was down on the flats then, you know, and the Nome River is just ahead of us. So then we started, and we had to make post holes with our legs. The snow was so deep, we didn't have no snowshoes, and every step we made was like making a post hole. And, so we walked to the river. We got to the river, must have been a half a mile away.
Unfortunately, the last 2 minutes of this story are damaged beyond saving, so I'll have to finish it in his stead. A Civil Air Patrol pilot who was friends of the family was out flying that day looking for Grandpa and noticed the boards that had been laid out in an arrow pointing to Nome. The small bush plane followed Grandpa's tracks and rescued the two men. After flying to get paramedics, they returned to the crash and retrieved General Noyes and Major Kobe. Kobe recovered and continued flying for the Alaskan Scouts, but General Noyes passed away. The reason this story is so powerful to me is that it's one of the foundational reasons I became a survival instructor. Even in a day and age where wilderness survival is a hobby and no longer a lifestyle, it's comforting to know that the basic needs are still the same. So here's my parting message to you. Stay fed, drink water, maintain temperature, and stay healthy.